From being a Spanish watchtower in the 16th century to the first official American lighthouse to now the most haunted lighthouse in the entire world. During Spanish colonization of the area in the 16th century, this was a wooden watchtower. Then in 1737, a more permanent coquina stone watchtower was built in its place. And in 1821, when Florida became a U.S. territory, the St. Augustine Lighthouse was built in its place. Long before the idea of a lighthouse was even conceived, in the year 1565, to help stop the spread of French influence in the area, there was a Spanish admiral named Pedro Menendez de Aviles. He traversed the Atlantic with 5 ships and around 500 men, eventually landing in the area now known as St. Augustine, Florida. And his mission for him and his men was to push back against the French fort of Fort Caroline and reclaim northeastern Florida for the Spanish crown. And though there was little hope for victory over the French, luckily for them, a hurricane came through and devastated the French fleet. So with the French defeated and retreating, Pedro and his men stayed in the St. Augustine area and saw their presence as a deterrent for European rivals. And it's greatly assumed that around this time is when the wooden watchtower was first built. Thanks to archived records of a map from 1586 after the assault of Sir Francis Drake, there's a map scribed of the St. Augustine area specifically referencing the wooden watchtower that once stood there. Described as a beacon in the attack records and with the trade that flowed through the region at the time, it likely served as a modern-day lighthouse. And despite the destruction that Sir Francis Drake brought to the St. Augustine area, nearly burning it all down, including the watchtower, the Spanish would eventually return. And eventually the Spanish did take over the St. Augustine area once again. Then in 1737, they built the coquina stone watchtower. After roughly 26 years, with the Treaty of Paris in 1763, the British had reclaimed St. Augustine and had put a small wooden lantern at the top of the tower. However, that lantern was very short-lived. After the American Revolution, and in 1783 with the Second Treaty of Paris, the Spanish were allowed to reclaim St. Augustine and the entire state of Florida. And inevitably, the Spanish did to the lantern what Rick James did to Charlie Murphy's couch. Yeah, you feel old yet? Me too. St. Augustine had now been under Spanish control for another 38 years until 1821, when the U.S. government purchased the land from Spain. And now the U.S. government had added more coastline to its map and had another mission to improve security around its coastal areas for incoming trade ships. So a $5,000 grant was given to the state of Florida to improve the St. Augustine watchtower. But this eventually led to the conversion to a lighthouse so incoming port ships were able to see their way in the darkness. It was outfitted with 10 lamps and 10 14-inch reflectors, manned by the lighthouse keeper, Juan Andreu. And fun fact, he was the first Hispanic American to oversee any federal government building. But Juan remained the lighthouse keeper until 1845, when an unknown person came in and took over for him, until 1854, at which point Juan's cousin Joseph had served as the lighthouse keeper until his untimely death in 1859, which according to historical records is because he was refreshing the paint on the top of the lighthouse when scaffolding failed, sending him plummeting to his death 60 feet until he hit the ground, which is when his wife Maria became the new lighthouse keeper until the Confederate Army ordered that the lighthouse be darkened in 1861. This was an attempt to darken the waters and try and disorient Union ships trying to attack St. Augustine. And it remained this way for a little bit over a year when the Union finally landed there and took control of the area. And 2 years after the Civil War had ended, the lighthouse was finally relit. However, there was an issue. In 1871, the U.S. government began to question the integrity of the area surrounding the lighthouse, believing that coastal erosion may soon topple it. So a new lighthouse was constructed nearby and finished in 1874. However, one day, tragedy struck, marking a very important and gruesome point in St. Augustine's history. In 1873, Mary, Eliza, and Carrie Pitty, along with one of their friends, were playing on a railway cart, almost like a modern-day roller coaster, until tragedy struck, flipping the cart into the river and trapping 3 of the girls, killing them. Mary, Eliza, and their friend who to this day still isn't known. Lighthouse staff and Dark of the Moon ghost tours report that the girls are avid tricksters, loving to play pranks like tying your shoelaces together, or even to the rails in the lighthouse. It's said that they even love to trace people's tattoos and have tea parties. It's also common to hear the ghostly laughter of the girls and even see full-body apparitions of them in clothing from the 1870s. Not a lot is known about Peter, other than he was the lighthouse's longest-serving keeper. Notorious for his unyielding enforcement of the rules, many visitors now see him as evil, or just as aggressive in general, because he was a man very big on respect. Being very big on respect, if you enter the lighthouse keeper's quarters, or the lighthouse itself, Peter is known to knock the brim of your hat off. Also known to be an avid cigar smoker, specifically cherry tobacco. It can often be smelled at the top of the lighthouse or in the basement, which was the only 2 places his wife allowed him to smoke his cigars. Also rumored to be Peter, but unknown if it is also the girls, many women have reported someone stroking their hair and caressing their arms and legs. Like many other locations, the St. Augustine Lighthouse has their own woman in white. Maria, the wife of former lighthouse keeper Joseph, can often be seen at the top of the lighthouse, crying into the wind, seeming like she's seeking out her husband. Also seen wandering the trails around the lighthouse, many people have believed that she was actually a reenactor, only to find out from the Dark of the Moon ghost tours that they don't have reenactors. It seems as though she does leave visitors alone, but nonetheless, seeing a woman in white crying at the top of the lighthouse, or wandering around the forest, is still creepy. But would you guys ever go here? I know I probably would. I'm a freak for Civil War history. If you would ever go here, let me know in the comments down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for sticking to the end. Have a good one, and I will see you next week.